Hey, this is Tim Durling. Welcome to another episode of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. We'd like to change things up. This one's a little bit different. It's not the first time I'll be talking about CDs because I did that with Cheap Trick, of course. But this time it's kind of an album review, but it's also bringing up to speed. If you grew up in the late 1980s and you were into rock music, if you were into popular music in general, there's absolutely no way that you could have avoided the music of the Swedish band called Europe, because their song The Final Countdown just became one of those piece of pop culture. It was a big hit, but it also became used in sporting events, and it was in a few movies, and it just was one of those songs that's everywhere. And they had a very successful run, and towards the late 80s, I would probably guess a lot of North American fans thought, okay, well, they disappeared. It's not really the case. They did disband in the early 90s, and they actually got back together in the new millennium, I believe sometime around 2003. And since that time, they've been extremely prolific. They've actually put out 5 new albums since then. And they just released a brand new one. I don't even know if it's been out a month as of the time of this filming. So this is kind of bringing North American fans who might not be aware that Europe is still very much alive and well. I don't believe they tour in North America, which is a shame. Same lineup that they had when they first hit their big fame. In other words, the same lineup that produced the Final Countdown album, which had that title song, and it also had the song Carrie, which is another big hit. That lineup is now intact, which is pretty much unheard of in rock bands. It's still Joey Tempest on lead vocals, John Norum on guitar, John Levin on bass guitar, Mick McKelly on keyboards, and Ian Haugland on drums. It's the same lineup. So I'm going to go through the albums they've done. Mainly we're going to talk about the new one, which just came out this year, called War of Kings, on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. This is Start from the Dark. This came out in 2004. This was Europe's comeback album. And the back cover there. This version that I have is a Japanese version on Victor Entertainment, which is a Japanese label that's distributed a lot of big bands. This actually has some extras on it. It's got live versions of Seven Doors Hotel and Wings of Tomorrow from the Sweden Rock Festival 2004. And those 2 songs both come from their first and second albums, respectively. There's also a little documentary on here about the making of Start from the Dark. I've always loved the Europe logo. And there it is on the CD there. The Start from the Dark. Heavier album, very, very down-tuned, as a lot of bands were doing. Keyboards kept to a very minimum. You might be surprised at how heavy that is. 2006 came the next Europe album called Secret Society. This one is on, this is a Sanctuary Records release. I believe it comes from it's a European version. Doesn't have any writing on this at all, except for Europe down the side here, and it's not their logo. This album is a little bit more melodic, a little bit more in keeping with the classic Europe sound. Now this CD, as you can see, inside the O in Europe is the E in their logo, if that makes any sense. 2009, next Europe album came out called Last Look at Eden. This is a European version as well. Now this is made in Germany. Hard to find on these shores. And this one is on Edel Records. This is a pretty good CD. There's a few songs. There's a ballad on here called New Love in Town that I think was a European hit for the band. Green color there on the CD itself. 2012, never more than 3 years between albums too, which is, for a band of their age, is also kind of unheard of. 2012, they released this album called Bag of Bones. This album was noted for a few reasons. It was produced by Kevin Shirley, which is a name, he's worked with a lot of big bands. He's worked with Journey, he's worked with Aerosmith, he's worked with Rush, he's worked with Iron Maiden, he's worked on a lot of Led Zeppelin reissues. I'm not necessarily a big fan of his production sound for the most part, but this album sounds really, really good. This is kind of when I came back on board as a Europe fan. I knew that they had released these other albums, but I didn't have them. But When this came out, I heard the song Not Supposed to Sing the Blues. I saw the video for it, and I said, this is good, and I got that, and then I caught up on all those other ones. Actually, Start from the Dark, I had a little trouble getting. That's the CD to Bag of Bones itself. But what we're really here to talk about is this, War of Kings. This is the latest Europe album. Like I said, it just came out. Today is March 25th when I'm filming this, and I don't think this album has been out for a complete month. And this is a German version. This is on UDR. I don't even know if they call them record companies anymore. There's the spine, and there's the back cover. You could see on the back cover, this was produced by someone named Dave Cobb. If you're familiar with the group Rival Sons, which is actually a pretty good new group, he's worked with them, and they liked the sound that he got on their album, so they wanted to work with him. That's what the CD itself looks like. We'll take a look inside the booklet here. Like I said, all of these 5 albums were recorded with the same lineup. This wasn't the original Europe lineup, but it's the lineup that gave us the final countdown. Like I said, that's pretty unheard of these days. So, some of the artwork inside there. Of course, it's got band pictures throughout. This is kind of on the back cover. I like the artwork. It's very classy. You've got kind of like a chessboard thing happening here. So, first song, War of Kings, title song. Very majestic, very heavy, very melodic. There's a lot of... they kind of wear their influences on their sleeve. There's a lot of Deep Purple, a lot of Rainbow happening. There's even some Dio. Of course, with Joey Tempest, he doesn't really sound like anyone else, so you kind of know it's Europe. John Norum is always, fantastic shredding guitar player, although he can get very bluesy at times. Hole in My Pocket's the second song. It's fast, heavy one. Really, really good. The Second Day is like a slow, heavy one. No real ballads on this one. Praise You is kind of a... I don't want to say funky, because these guys don't really get funky, but if they did, that's what it would sound like. Nothing to Ya is got all kinds of attitude in it. It's really heavy. California 405, that one did not hit me over the head at first as being all that good. I thought it had promise, but the chorus kind of, I don't know, let me down a little bit. But it is kind of laid back. It kind of reminds me of a sort of a latter-day Deep Purple. When I say latter-day, I mean something like Knocking at Your Back Door. Days of Rock and Roll is a really, really catchy song. I don't know if it's a little Thin Lizzy happening, but it's kind of a shuffle. Children of the Mind, actually, they have a song on their first album called Children of This Time, and that one, probably because of the title, reminds me of that. Rainbow Bridge, sort of a slower, like I said, it's got a very, they're not out writing hit singles, so they're just doing what they want. This is a slower, heavy one. Angels with Broken Hearts is a slower one. I wouldn't really call it a ballad. And the last song on it, Light It Up, is sort of more of a lightweight, upbeat rocker. This is just rockers from start to finish. I would recommend any of these CDs to anyone that ever liked Europe back in the day. It's a shame because they don't get on any tour packages either, so there's not even a chance for them to kind of get back on their feet over here. It's hard enough for 80s bands, but when you have a band that came from sort of a market not in North America or not even in the UK, sometimes they have a hard time to regain a foothold. I think a really good package tour would suit them well, because I've seen clips of them live. They're still really, really good. Tempest still has his vocal chops. He's obviously taking care of himself. So I would recommend, and if you think of Europe as being sort of a poppier band because of the final countdown, and you've heard that keyboard riff so many times in your head, you might be surprised at just how good and how solid these are. I mean, it's melodic rock. It's not thrash. It's not grungy. It's not new metal. It's just good old-fashioned hard rock. And the keyboards, for the most part, on these 5 albums that have come out in the last 11 years, are really, really kind of kept to a minimum. Some parts, the keyboards and guitars mix up, kind of like what Dream Theater do. But I would say they're definitely worth seeking out, whether you find them on Amazon or wherever you get your music online, unless you happen to be near a record store that has an import section and will carry them. And if that's the case, support your local record stores for sure. Some big things are coming up on Tim's Vinyl Confessions. most notably a few concerts that I hope to be attending, and we'll have a related show with whatever bands. So thanks for watching this edition of Tim's Vinyl Confessions. This show is primarily talking about my vinyl record collection, but basically I'm talking about classic rock in general. So thank you for watching this one. Be sure and like it, share it, YouTube, Facebook, all the usuals. If you're just new to this show, I would recommend that you watch the previous episodes I've done.